San Francisco at night was so bright, it seemed as if the sky itself was being pulled into the tall glass towers. In the heart of the city, the Helios Dynamics Tower stood like a pillar of light, a symbol of pride for the era of artificial energy. On the top floor, in a large elliptical boardroom, the corporation's most powerful people were discussing the future of the world, a future named Helionet. Elena Voss walked into the center of the room in a light gray suit, her hair tied neatly back. The LED lights reflected on her face, calm, controlled, revealing nothing but certainty. Beside her was Marcus Hale, the security advisor, and the man who had been with her since the days when Helios was just a small laboratory. He smiled faintly, his eyes holding something between trust and control. On the massive hologram screen, Helionet appeared as a web of light enveloping the globe. Each point of light was a power station, connected by countless imaginary fiber-optic strands. Elena looked around the room. "If everything goes according to plan," she said, "in 2 weeks, Helionet will go live. For the first time in history, humanity will be able to control global energy without consuming fuel." The room was silent for a few seconds, then applause erupted. Marcus leaned in and whispered in her ear, "You just made the whole world believe that nothing can go wrong." Elena replied, softly, her eyes still fixed on the chart running across the screen. "Nothing should go wrong, Marcus." Outside the glass walls, the city was a living circuit board. The flow of cars, streetlights, and billboards all merged into the pulse of a giant organism. She knew full well that one small error, a single line of bad code, could make that organism stop breathing. But the people around her only spoke of numbers, market shares, government contracts, and the imminent rise in stock prices. At that same moment, 3 floors below in the basement, another world existed. No light, no laughter, only the hum of electricity and the smell of metal. Jonas Reed was kneeling beside an old electrical panel. Current flowed through the cables like blood vessels, emitting a steady, rhythmic flicker of light. He checked the parameters, noting every minor fluctuation. Jonas didn't belong here. 5 years ago, he had been one of the best security engineers at Grid, the organization once responsible for protecting Europe's energy network. Then, a data breach that year ended his career. They said he was irresponsible, that he had allowed the system to be attacked. He offered no defense. When you lose everything, you realize the truth is less important than who takes the fall. Now he wore the blue uniform of the maintenance crew, his night shift lasting until morning. No one paid him any attention, and that made him freer than anyone.
His hand glided over the control screen, his gaze stopping on a small graph, an electrical pulse that appeared regularly every 42 minutes, something not listed in the operational schematics. He zoomed in, checking the signal's origin. It came from a secondary line, located just behind the central switch. Jonas frowned. No one was allowed to interfere with that area except the original design team. He opened his personal laptop and quickly typed a few lines of code. A string of characters appeared, Channel 42, active. The status line blinked like a heartbeat. Jonas paused, looking around. The room was empty, save for the whir of cooling fans and the faint smell of ozone. He saved the data and wrote a short report to send to the engineering department. The system responded almost instantly. Recipient does not exist. He tried again, changing the address. The same result. On the third attempt, the connection was automatically terminated. Jonas leaned back against the wall, watching the screen go black. In the darkness, he remembered the old days, the warnings that had been ignored, the signs that were dismissed as false noise. Perhaps history was repeating itself. Only this time, he was the nobody. He stood up, took a flashlight, and followed the conduits to the auxiliary power core. A large electrical panel came into view, covered in a thin layer of dust, but there were fresh fingerprints on its surface. Someone had opened it recently. Jonas placed his hand on the steel frame, feeling the heat radiate from it. The current was flowing stronger than normal. He removed the cover and leaned in to inspect the connections. One of them had been newly replaced, a type of cable with an identification code different from the Helios standard. No way. he muttered to himself. He pulled out his phone and opened a scanning app. The code traced back to an internal IP address, but with an additional hidden port connected to a server located outside the United States. Meanwhile, Elena was leaving the meeting on the top floor. The long, cavernous hallway reflected light like a mirror. She paused at the glass wall, looking down at the city below. A notification appeared on her smartwatch. Legal department warning that accelerating the schedule may violate inspection protocols. She frowned, but a moment later, Marcus walked up to her. "Don't worry," he said, his expression calm. "Everything is under control." The words sounded right, but Lena knew that the higher you climbed, the more fragile control became. She smiled, stepped into the elevator, and said nothing more. In the basement, Jonas returned to the control room and entered a few more commands to confirm his suspicions. The screen displayed it clearly. Data was being duplicated to an external address. A mirror sync process was scheduled to run automatically in the background every 42 minutes. He looked at the clock. The next cycle would begin in 2 minutes. He tried to access the main console to stop the command, but his permissions were denied. His account was only maintenance level. He couldn't intervene that deeply. The words "access denied" flashed repeatedly. Jonas lightly struck the keyboard, sweat trickling down his neck. He knew that if this data leak was real, Helionet was being bled dry from the inside. He pulled out his personal phone and called the shift supervisor. No one answered. Both the internal network and communications were silent. The building felt as if it were encased in an invisible wall, blocking all signals from getting out. A faint hiss came from the main power room. Jonas turned. The row of indicator lights on the wall switched from green to orange, then red. He walked quickly toward it. The largest breaker on the floor was vibrating slightly. A drop of sweat fell onto his hand as he placed his finger on the power test button. The current was surging. The system was charging at double its permitted capacity. Jonas looked up at the central monitor and saw the data transfer rate spike. The graph flickered non-stop, numbers overlapping like a fever chart. A flash of blue light flared, then died. The entire electrical panel shuddered. He understood that something was waking itself up. On the 81st floor, Elena was leaving the parking garage. The elevator's yellow light cast a tired glow on her face. Her phone buzzed gently. A system notification. Auxiliary power source experiencing abnormal surge. She looked at the numbers, frowned, then cast her gaze toward the opposite tower, where rows of lights were flickering as if someone was tampering with them. Down in the basement, Jonas backed away, his eyes glued to the electrical panel. The data on the screen froze on a single line. Transfer 98% completed. He clenched his fists, his breathing heavy. In the midst of the hum of the transformers, he heard the groaning of stressed metal, a warning that a breaking point was near. Jonas looked around, then up at the ceiling where light from the upper floors streamed down through a ventilation shaft. He sighed and raised his hand to the breaker. The current ran through his fingers, hot and sharp. He knew that with one pull, the entire tower would be plunged into darkness. But if he didn't, Helionet's data would be gone forever. A small explosion in the control room shook the steel frame. Sparks flared next to the electrical panel. Jonas flinched, took a step back, and then stopped. He took a deep breath and gripped the metal handle. The screen flickered one last time. The words "Sync complete" appeared in bright red. Jonas gritted his teeth. He yanked the lever. The sound of electricity screamed, and the lights in the basement went out. The entire Helios tower fell silent, leaving only the heavy breathing of a man standing in the dark, his hands still trembling from the final jolt. On the upper floors, amid the brightly lit city, the lights went out all at once. The sky turned pitch black. The screens, the billboards, the streetlights, all of it was gone. Elena stood in the parking garage, watching the surrounding buildings vanish. For 11 minutes, her world went dark. And in the deepest part of the tower, Jonas still stood, his hands stained with soot, looking up into the darkness
as all power ceased. A heartbeat later, he heard the cooling fans wind down completely, followed by the dry click of the system rebooting. The last sound before everything went dead was the soft pop of the breaker. A clean thump. And then the world fell into silence. No more fans, no more light. Only a darkness that swallowed all remaining sound. Jonas stood still, sweat beading on his forehead. In the blackness, he could hear his own heartbeat. The massive building was as quiet as if it had stopped breathing. 1 second. 2 seconds. Then the first sound emerged, an emergency siren, followed by the distant echo of shouting. People on the upper floors began pouring into the hallways. Helios Tower, the world's smartest energy hub, was in a blackout. On the 81st floor, Elena looked up at the ceiling as the lights vanished. The hologram disappeared, leaving the boardroom lit only by the flashing red of the backup lights. The faces in the dim glow were etched with fear. A few people jumped to their feet, trying to call on their personal devices, but it was all useless. The internal network was completely down. Marcus was calmer than the others. He walked to Elena's side. "The backup system will kick in within 10 minutes, he said, his voice firm. "It's nothing serious." Elena didn't answer. She stared into the void where the Helionet logo had once glowed, feeling that something was wrong. A wrongness that wasn't a technical glitch. 11 minutes later, the lights returned. The entire building lit up at once as if waking from a dream. Employees let out sighs of relief. But before the sense of security could return, a monitor on the control desk flickered to life, displaying a rapid succession of red text. "Log alert. Data transfer interrupted. Destination Arcos Global." Elena strode forward, her heart pounding. She didn't understand what had happened, but the moment she read the word Arcos, she knew Helios was facing a problem far greater than a power outage. She immediately called the engineering department, ordering a full scan of the core network. Leo, the head of systems, ran in, his face pale. "There were signs of an intrusion. Someone opened a data port for 42 minutes before the system went down."
Marcus checked his watch. Who has access? Only the security team and auxiliary engineering. Elena turned, her voice decisive. "Get down to the basement. Check the entire auxiliary power sector." When they arrived, the smell of smoke and burnt metal hit them. The steel door swung open to reveal Jonas, the man in the maintenance uniform hunched over an electrical panel, a tool in his hand. The yellow emergency lights illuminated his dust-streaked face and his strangely bright eyes. He looked up as he saw them, saying nothing. Marcus stepped forward and pointed. "Him. It's clearly sabotage." Jonas didn't react, only stooping to close the panel cover. Elena approached, her eyes scanning the area, severed wires, a freshly thrown breaker, the floor still wet with water. "What were you doing here?" "Rebooting the power," Jonas answered curtly. "You're the one who cut the power?" "Yes." She held her breath, her gaze sharpening. "Why?" Jonas didn't answer right away. He looked up at the server screen, which was now glowing blue. The data stream was incomplete, partially cut off mid-transfer. "If I hadn't," he said slowly, "the entire core data would have been copied. Your system is compromised." Marcus let out a short laugh and stepped forward, snatching the tool from Jonas's hand. "He's lying. It's an excuse. A basement worker couldn't possibly understand the Helionet core network." Elena turned to Leo. "Check the logs, now." Leo plugged his device into the control panel. Lines of data flooded the screen, freezing at the exact moment the system had crashed. He looked up, his eyes shifting from the monitor to Jonas, then to Elena. There was an unauthorized access. A process was sending data out, and it stopped at the precise moment of the blackout. The control room fell dead silent. Jonas stood still, his hand still clenching his tool. He made no further attempt to explain.
Elena looked around, noticing the smell of smoke from the electrical panel was growing thicker. She gave a quick order. Isolate this area. Back up all critical data. No one leaves this building until we have verification. 2 security guards stepped forward and took Jonas by the arms. He didn't resist, only glancing back at the panel. Amidst the flashing blue lights, the row of warning lights began to pulse faster, blinking like a countdown. Jonas frowned, his lips moving silently, but no one could hear him. Elena was about to ask another question, but Marcus cut her off. We can't let him stay here. He needs to be detained immediately to prevent further sabotage.
She was quiet for a few seconds, then nodded. Take him to the security office. Hold him in isolation. Jonas walked between the 2 guards, his head slightly bowed, his steps heavy. As the steel door closed behind him, the warning lights in the basement flashed even more frantically. Through a narrow gap in the door, he saw it, a red glow spreading across the wall, like blood seeping through skin. On the 81st floor, Marcus strode into his private office. As the door closed, he raised his wrist to look at his smartwatch. The small screen glowed, displaying an encrypted message. System paused. Auto-reactivate in 24 hours. The plan must proceed. Marcus stood motionless for a few seconds. Outside the glass, the city was bright again, its buildings brilliant as if nothing had ever happened. He turned, his fingers tapping lightly on the desk, a steady, cold rhythm. Down in the basement, the warning lights shifted to a continuous red flash. The automated system began to reboot. The control panel vibrated gently, emitting a low, deep hum, like a colossal machine stirring from its slumber. The 11 minutes of darkness had only been the beginning. The isolation room on the 20th floor was small and cramped, its 4 white walls so bright they felt cold. Jonas sat on a metal chair, his hands loosely bound with magnetic cuffs. His laptop, tools, and even his maintenance ID had been confiscated. They thought he was a saboteur. He didn't bother to react. All he needed was time. On his wrist, his old watch was still working, the only memento he'd kept from his time at Grid. It wasn't just a watch. Inside was a micrologging tool that automatically saved all signal streams when he worked near an electronic network, an old professional habit that no one knew about. Jonas switched it to stealth mode, letting the screen display a stream of log codes glittering like tiny sparks. He patiently reviewed each line, slowly piecing them together into an access chain. The timestamps matched perfectly with the moment he had detected the strange pulse, and for months before that. Someone had been opening this hidden pathway repeatedly, regularly, precisely. He closed his eyes, trying to recall Helion's architecture. If his guess was right, that access port was located right in the core control hub of the 81st floor, a place only one person had the authority to touch. Elena. On the top floor, she hadn't slept. All night, the lights in her office remained on. Under the cold white glow, her face was etched with fatigue, but her eyes never left the numbers. She was reviewing the entire system log tracing Helion's automated backups. As the data appeared, her heart skipped a beat. There wasn't just one access session to the system core. There were dozens. Each one occurred at the exact time of the scheduled backups, repeating regularly for months. All of them logged in with a single account. Hale.m.
She stopped, staring at the name for a long time. Marcus Hale. The man who sat beside her in every meeting, who helped her convince the board of investors, who always reassured her that everything is under control. Elena opened the source code directory, a place only she had permission to read. Among the thousands of lines of symbols, she saw a small, handwritten note, not formatted according to protocol. Root handshake Arcos, verified link. Next to it was an authentication string, a handshake between 2 systems, meaning Helionet and Arcos could communicate directly, legally, and with the approval of her own access credentials. She'd had never authorized that. A chill ran down her spine. She printed the log, clutched it in her hand, and called Leo, the head of the systems department, to a secondary server room. When the steel door closed, Elena handed him the paper. "This is Marcus's code," Leo said softly, reading it over.
He wrote this handshake segment back in the design phase. No one noticed because it was encrypted as part of a signal test. So the system could be copying data to another network? Not could be. It definitely is. They looked at each other. Outside, the dawn stained the glass windows of faint blue. Alina tightened her grip on the paper. We can't let Helionet reboot on schedule. If Marcus planted a hidden code, the system will automatically connect to Arcos. We have to shut it all down before the next cycle begins, Leo said in a lum voice, but only he and you have that authority. On the 20th floor, Jonas heard the floor beneath him vibrate. He looked up. A deep hum spread through the walls, like the breathing of a massive beast waking from sleep. The system was rebooting. He turned on his watch, monitoring the signal frequency. Just as he'd suspected, the Arcos sync process was scheduled to run automatically. It would initiate in 30 minutes. He scanned the room. There was nothing but a thick glass window and a magnetic lock. He checked the hinges, pushed. It didn't budge. The only way out was to break the electronic lock. Jonas removed his watch strap and touched the two metal ends to the lock mechanism. A small spark flared, and the lock clicked, but didn't open. He tried again, sweat dampening the back of his neck. Elena and Leo hurried to Marcus's office. She carried the printed log, maintaining her composure as best she could. When she entered, Marcus was sitting in front of the window, the light falling on his shoulders. He looked up and gave a small smile, as if nothing was wrong. "I'm glad you're here," he said. "I was just about to report to you. Last night's incident was just a sync error. The system is stable now, nothing serious." "Not serious. Look at this. What is this access port?" Marcus picked up the paper, hesitated for a split second, then smiled. "A link testing algorithm. I wrote it to ensure integrity." "I see. Thank you for explaining."
She stood up, feigning calm, and took the paper to leave. But in the moment he looked down to place the log on his desk, she caught something that no chart could ever record. The rapid blink of his eyes, the slight pursing of his lips, a hairline crack in his calm facade. After Marcus left the room, Elena stood still for a few seconds. She opened her desk drawer and took out a small device Jonas had left behind before he was taken away. A round, finger-sized chip used to measure electromagnetic signal waves. He had told her, if the light turns red, it means there's an unauthorized channel active. Check the 81st floor. Elena activated the device. A soft beep sounded. A red light blinked continuously. She lifted her head, her gaze drawn to the ceiling. Directly above her, the Helionet core was humming, its rows of servers hidden behind glass walls reflecting a faint blue light. Down on the 20th floor, Jonas heard the lock click open. He pushed the door and stepped into an empty hallway. The warning signal on his watch was still flashing. Sync start in 1942. At the same time, on the 81st floor, Elena watched the red light blink faster. She grabbed her phone and dialed Leo, her voice low and urgent. "We're running out of time. The system is reactivating itself." From deep within the building, the servers whirred to life in unison, a sound like a distant roar. The 81st floor blazed like a data storm. On hundreds of screens, red text flashed relentlessly. Helionet synchronizing to Arcos Cloud. Charts vibrated violently, data streams surging exponentially. The system was no longer responding. Buildings across San Francisco began receiving error signals from the Helios Center. Traffic lights switched erratically. Power stations shut down and restarted on their own. The city felt as if it were trembling with an electronic fever. Elena ran down the corridor, her shoes echoing on the metal floor. She held her phone, but the entire internal network had been locked down. A system message announced that administrative rights had been transferred to remote control, Arcos authorization. All control had been stripped from her. She rushed to an elevator and pressed the button for the basement. The elevator stopped midway, its lights flickering out before turning an emergency red. She pried open the escape hatch and climbed down the service ladder. On the 20th floor, Jonas had just escaped the isolation room. Alarms blared in intervals, the flashing lights mixing with the smell of electrical smoke. He bent down to grab a backpack left in a corner. Inside was an old, encrypted drive containing a self-destruct algorithm he had written back at Grid. It wasn't supposed to exist, as it could destroy an entire control network with a single command. He never thought he'd need it again, but now it was his only chance. He ran through the smoke-filled hallways, heading for the central basement. As the door opened, Elena emerged from the opposite stairwell, breathing heavily, her face covered in sweat and dust. They looked at each other, no explanation needed. They both knew things were spiraling out of control.
"Can you stop it?" Elena asked, pulling him past a set of sparking wires. "I can only destroy it. There's no other way." "What percentage of the data has been copied?" "Almost all of it. If we don't cut it off now, Arcos will have Helionet's entire source code." She said nothing more, just nodded. They both entered the central core. The space opened up like the inside of a giant organism, thousands of glowing servers, pulsing with waves of hot air. The server racks were arranged in a circle, with a control pedestal in the center, the heart of Helionet. The temperature was beyond safe limits, and the glass walls were fogged with condensation. Jonas connected his drive to an auxiliary port, and a pitch-black interface appeared. Lines of code began to run. At that moment, a familiar voice echoed from the security speakers, Marcus's voice. "Elena." The voice was deep, even, and cold. "I know you're down there. Don't be a fool. Helionet no longer belongs to Helios. It belongs to Arcos. A new era requires people who dare to cross boundaries." Elena looked up at the camera, her eyes flashing with anger. "Do you call that an era or treason?" "It's evolution. You wanted a world without energy shortages. I'm just accelerating that. Arcos will control the global network, distributing energy fairly, so no single nation can have a monopoly. You should be grateful." "Fairly?" Jonas interjected, his hands still typing. "You're going to let a corporation manipulate the entire planet and call that fair?" Marcus was silent for a few seconds, then laughed. "You talk like someone who still believes in morality within the system." "Morality doesn't feed anyone, Jonas." On the screen, the synchronization process reached 93%. Jonas said softly, "We're out of time." He opened the destruction algorithm's interface. The text appeared, "Requires CEO authentication." Elena stepped forward and placed her hand on the biometric scanner. A light scanned across her palm, a green glow on her skin. A warning popped up. "Confirmed destruction. All data will be lost." Jonas looked at her, his expression heavy. "If you confirm this, Helionet will be gone. 4 years of your research will go with it. And if I don't, the world will be controlled by a man I once trusted." Over the speaker, Marcus's voice grew harsh. "Elena, you don't understand the consequences. One push of a button will kill millions of dollars in investment and cause the global energy system to collapse. You will be the destroyer." She looked directly into the camera. "If I have to choose between justice and power, I choose justice." Jonas gave a slight nod. "Do it." She pressed confirm. A deafening groan echoed from deep within the building, like the sound of twisting metal. All the lights turned orange, then went dark. The servers let out a final scream before falling silent. The screens faded, leaving only the flashing red of the last warning lights. In an instant, Helios Tower shook. Light bulbs exploded in succession like fireworks, and wires shot out sparks. The temperature rose sharply. Jonas pulled Elena behind the control pedestal as a shard of glass crashed down beside them. The fire alarm blared insistently. "Run!" he shouted. They raced through the smoke-filled corridor, dodging sparks raining down from the ceiling. Just as they reached the door, a wave of heat erupted behind them, blowing dust and documents into the air. She glanced back to see the server racks emit a blinding white light, then go dark. Across the city, sections of light began to fade.
Neighborhoods plunged into darkness for a second time. No car horns, no billboards, no sound but the wind and the distant wail of emergency sirens. Helionet was dead. Jonas and Elena leaned against the wall in the outer hallway, both gasping for breath. Smoke clouded everything. Heat radiated against their skin. The sound of shattering glass echoed around them. Elena wiped her face, her hand coming away gray with soot. "We did the right thing, didn't we?" she asked quietly, not looking at him. Jonas took a deep breath. Sometimes you have to destroy something to start over. A dim light shone through the broken doorframe. Dawn was breaking, its faint light reflecting off the shattered glass, touching both their faces. On the lower levels, the emergency systems kicked in, and the sound of backup generators began to start up. The city was still alive. They looked out the window where the first light of a new day was cutting through the smoke and dust. The Helios Tower trembled one last time, and then fell silent. Elena closed her eyes, feeling her heartbeat sink with the sound of the dying machines. A week after the global power failure, the world was still in shock. From New York to Tokyo, major newspapers ran the same headline: "The Blackout 11, the shutdown that saved the world." The story of the terrifying power outage at Helios Tower spread like wildfire, and for the first time, people spoke of a system failure not as a disaster, but as a salvation. The morning news replayed images of Marcus Hale being escorted through an international airport, his hands cuffed, surrounded by a throng of reporters. In his luggage, the FBI found a hard drive containing an under-the-table stock transfer agreement with Arcos, along with the stolen Helionet data. Alongside it was a mountain of financial evidence showing he had received millions of dollars from foreign accounts. Everything Jonas had suspected had been proven true. The FBI's official statement aired on Monday morning. Helionet was embedded with spyware from its initial design phase. The goal was to seize control of the global energy network. The most crucial piece of evidence came from the personal device of a maintenance worker, Jonas Reed. On screen, a spokesperson held up a small silver watch. That watch, once on Jonas's wrist, had recorded the entire deleted log chain, the only untainted evidence that survived the shutdown.
Elena watched the news alone in her dark office. She looked out at the city, still flickering as it went through energy restoration phases. During those 11 minutes of darkness, the world had fallen completely silent, and it was that moment of silence that had saved it. The next day, she appeared before the entire board and hundreds of reporters. No elaborate makeup, no excuses. "Helionet has failed," she said, her voice low and steady. "Not because of the technology, but because our trust was misplaced. We allowed power to supersede responsibility. Now, Helios will start over, from zero." She refused all bailout packages. Her only request was to rebuild the system the right way herself. When the meeting ended, Elena left the room, walking past the still clamoring reporters. She didn't look at anyone, only tightened her grip on the silver ring on her finger, a personal reminder of what it meant to have true faith. Jonas wasn't there that day. He had submitted his resignation, leaving Helios with nothing more than a small bag. He wanted to go home, where his young son Eli was waiting. In their small suburban apartment, the boys sat at a table, carefully drawing intersecting circles of water with colored pencils. When he saw his father, Eli pointed at the drawing. "I think water has a memory," he said. "When I drop one drop into a glass, it doesn't disappear, it just changes shape." Jonas looked at his son and smiled. The innocent words made him realize that perhaps that was what the world needed, a new, cleaner memory. 2 days later, Elena showed up at his front door. No motorcade, no media, just her in a white shirt holding a folder. "I need you," she said bluntly. Jonas was surprised. "I don't belong at Helios anymore." "No, but Helios needs you.
We're going to rebuild the system, but this time it has to know how to protect itself. I want you to lead a new project, the Watermark Protocol." He frowned. "That sounds like my son's idea." Elena nodded. "It is. He said that current flows like water, and water always leaves a trace. That idea could save billions of data points from being erased or stolen. If we can do it, no shadow will ever be able to hide the truth again." Jonas was silent for a long time. He looked down at his hands, the hands that had pulled the lever, that had shut down an entire city. Finally, he nodded. "All right, but I'll do it my way." "That's why I came to you," Elena replied, a faint smile appearing after many somber days. 1 year later, Helionet 2.0 was launched to thunderous applause. The conference room was bathed in blue light, the ceiling reflecting hundreds of data streams like glowing rivers. The new system was built on the principle that water has a memory. Every access, every change left an indelible trace, like a drop of water seeping deep into the earth, which remains as moisture even after it dries. Elena stepped onto the stage, her voice clear without needing a microphone. Helionet 2.0 isn't just technology. It's a reminder that no light is eternal if it doesn't know how to fear the dark. Then she called Jonas to the stage. The entire auditorium rose to its feet in a standing ovation. In the front row, Eli sat with the young engineers. He beamed, holding up his old drawing, lines of light running through a drop of water. In his eyes, the world was still pristine, clean, and fixable. Late that night, on the rooftop of Helios Tower, the wind carried the salty moisture of the San Francisco Bay. The city below sparkled like a giant circuit, its buildings connected by threads of light. Jonas and Elena stood side by side, saying nothing. "Do you ever think that one day Helionet will run itself without needing us anymore?" Elena said softly. "I hope so," Jonas replied, his gaze distant. "Because if it can control itself, it means we've taught it when to stop." Rain began to fall, tiny droplets hitting the railing with a soft patter. Jonas held out his hand to catch a drop, letting it dissolve in his palm.
The city lights reflected in the water, making it glitter as if it held the entire sky. He smiled faintly.